This is the podcast where we go into something from our childhood or high school and see how it holds up today after we listen to it. Do we like it the same? Is it not as good? This is where we find out. And today we're going to cover the first hip-hop album that we've covered on the show. But before we go into that, what have you been up to this week?
Oh man, so I've gotten into Community, which is fun. I've had a lot of free time.
Nice.
And I've tried a few times before to start watching that. And once you mentioned it, I don't know, I felt like I definitely needed something that was a little more fun. And it's interesting too because that came out around the same time as the album I guess we're talking about, and it's like some of those old jokes are just kind of funny to like listen to in a modern frame of mind, but
yeah, I did notice some of the jokes were more dated, like that wouldn't be in writing nowadays.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's kind of interesting to go back and hear those.
I think one of them was like, oh, my cable broke. And I was thinking like, as a college student, I don't think it would be internet or Netflix now. It's so funny.
Yeah. And definitely like Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino's acting is really good in it.
Yeah.
As well as a lot of the other actors are pretty decent as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, this is like minor spoilers for you, but also not spoilers. But it like breaks away from a lot of the other sitcom tropes in that it doesn't go through the same motions every single time. They try and introduce a lot of like different concepts into it. There's still some like tropiness through there, but they shake it up a lot, which I think you might like.
Yeah, I've heard like one season is like pretty awful but artistic, so I'm interested.
Yeah, there definitely is one of those. They changed up the writers for it, so that impacted it pretty drastically. But it's I just finished it like a week ago, and I would say overall it's pretty good.
I've also been really getting into Frank Ocean this week and like listening to his albums for the first time ever, and that's been just so awesome. I just think he's like a super unique and artistic, and I don't know, he just approaches music from a way different. Way differently than most artists, especially of his like popularity.
Yeah, definitely. I really like his albums Channel Orange and Ocean, or not Ocean, Blonde a lot.
Yeah, I really got into Channel Orange, and I especially love like Pyramid, super like I just love how unique those songs are. They're not just like formulaic pop songs. They have like a story and like very dynamic elements to it. And then I listened on for the first time yesterday. And I just felt, it just didn't like click with me. It was very abstract, and I appreciated the art from it. It almost reminded me of Redbone in that like I appreciated it, but I didn't like totally, like it felt like I was looking at fine art at a museum, and I was like, that's really good, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah. That's one of the things that that I appreciate about him is that he can make something like that, but I also acknowledge it can be at the expense of accessibility. Like, it can throw you off a little bit.
Hold that thought for later in the episode.
Okay.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I've been listening to some music as well. Last week, the new 100 gecs like companion piece. It's a remix album, and normally when I listen to a remix album, I kind of just like I'll listen to all the remixes. I'll pick like the one or two that I like, and those are the only ones I'll ever go back to again. And I kind of dump the rest. This one was kind of unique in that it almost expands upon what they did originally, and it's still a bunch of remixes, but they're all really wacky and zany, and there's a couple new originals on it as well. So it's almost like a B-side album. So that's pretty cool. And what else has been good this week? Ooh, you showed us that Tynan flip of Lick It by Cascade and Skrillex, which we talked about recently. That was
and I replied to him. He posted on Reddit, Tynan himself, and I was like, oh, are you going to remix the Ice version of it? And he was like, oh, shoot, I forgot about that. So
that's funny. Yeah, that one's really good. Father John Misty put out a new EP today that I got to listen to, and that was decent. Yeah.
The Kid Cudi and Eminem song was kind of cool last week too.
I haven't gotten to listen to that yet, but I need to. That's a pretty interesting combination of two artists there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been needing to do that. You actually saw Kid Cudi one time, didn't you?
Yeah. He was really good. Oh.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Kid Cudi's in the genre of what we are talking about today. We're adjacent to that. But real quick, we normally do a happy hour, but is it a slightly less happy hour for you this week?
Yeah, I'm going with Kendrick. I'm a sober soul today, and I've just got some iced tea.
I'm Kendrick when he's rolling around with the homies, with the crew when he's younger. But because you didn't do an alcoholic beverage, I went for a slightly less interesting alcoholic beverage, and I just have a White Claw right here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I know it's anticlimactic. Because like yesterday I called you when I was in the store to help me pick out some beer, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm hot. I just went on a walk and I don't know, I was craving it. I made it myself though. It's like hibiscus mango, and
Sounds
I'm really
delicious.
loving
Wow.
it.
Well, we'll get to sample some of those other things that you got in a future episode. But I guess we're gonna go to the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about, and that's this album. This album from 2012. Yeah. So what do you think of this? How'd you ever wind up listening to this?
Yeah, this is so typically this show is things we grew up with and how they hold up today. This is kind of an exception. It half fits that bill because yes, I've heard a lot of these songs growing up and it came out almost a decade ago in 2012. But honestly, the way I came into loving and appreciating hip hop, and honestly, Kendrick is probably in my top 5 favorite artists. He's definitely my favorite rapper. I
Mm-hmm.
saw him live on his Damn tour, and it was
Yeah.
in a big arena. I was in like the really, really highest, worst seats, but I
Mm-hmm.
still love that show.
Mm-hmm.
His just performance and his just connection to the fans, even in a stadium like that, is amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's obviously way like with this album is really his origin story in a lot of ways. Um, but before all that, in high school, I remember specifically my first time like witnessing real hip hop was at the Mad Decent Block Party in 2013 with like Flosstradamus and Lunas and Riff Raff.
Yeah.
And I actually remember like Floss played a Glee. I think they played a Swimming Pools edit and a m.A.A.d edit. I don't know if you remember those, but
Yeah. So swimming pools they probably did because that was in their band two mix.
mm,
Yeah. Oh man, back in the days when you could just throw up a mix on SoundCloud and not have it taken down.
yeah. But like I guess it's interesting because I kind of approached hip hop from this like EDM lens of trap EDM kind of Flosstradamus, Arl Grime, all those guys, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting that they kind of like took something that was so underground and made it, clubby and like festival trap is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody like me, I really, in high school, hated hip hop. I really didn't like anything that was explicit, partly because I wasn't, like in middle school, I wasn't allowed to listen to stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even the songs like from Good Kid, Mad City that, Flosstradamus, Zed's Dad, Skrillex, all these DJs would play, they would play the songs that I just interpreted them as like, oh, just drink, 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 and like violence, 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 which you can kind of hear that in some of these songs, but the point is it's like conscious hip hop, quote unquote, which I actually really like that term, even though it can be overused. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that like growing up, I only saw that side of Kendrick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I remember when like this album came out in 2012, and at the time I wasn't like aware of anything Kendrick had done before. He was like still on the rise at that point. He was like performing as K-Dot before, and
Mm-hmm.
then he put out Section 80, and this was like, Mad City was kind of like his big debut. And I remember at the time, like all my friends were introducing me to like all kinds of hip hop. Like we're listening to Mac Miller and Tyler the Creator and Childish Gambino. And Childish Gambino is a little bit more on the little more intelligent side of all those.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, yo, but check out this like Kendrick Lamar guy, which like I remember my first memories were only listening to like swimming pools and backseat freestyle and on
Mm-hmm.
the with ASAP Rocky on fucking problems.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and at the time, kind of like you, yeah, I only saw the surface level message, but then I started to like dig deeper. I'm like, whoa, this is like but I was wondering why none of my other friends were into Kendrick at the time. And then of course they all were later down the line as he was like
Yeah.
just really blowing up around that time.
Yeah, I guess for me it was really inevitable too, because like, yeah, my friends would listen to it, especially when I got to college. I was like the only person in my dorm that had actual speakers that weren't just like, didn't have like a laptop. I brought my full computer and had like pretty decent speakers. So literally, I would like come
Mm-hmm.
back from something and my friends would just be in my room playing like ASAP Rocky, like super duper loud. Um,
Nice.
and I also like super got into hip hop through like Skrillex using like collabing with ASAP Rocky and Foreign Beggars and even like remixing Kendrick later on and like The Game and ASAP Ferg, and we also saw a lot of these peoples at festivals, like Rocky and Ferg especially impressed me, and I saw Logic in high school too, and so that was kind of my turning point, was like actually seeing it and like not even having a choice, but like eventually it just kind of grew on me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So tell us about this album a little bit. You
Hmm.
know, Kendrick had come off with Section 80, and then this was like, what a launch.
Yeah, because I remember like watching an interview right before this came out, and like the pre-order was on iTunes, and people were kind of speculating what kind of album it would be, and you could see the features like Dr. Dre and um,
Drake.
m.A.A.d and Drake and all these like crazy people on it. Um, and following like Section 80, some people I guess considered a mixtape, but it's definitely his first album as Lamar. Before he went as like K Dot, like you mentioned, and grew up in Compton. At age 8, he actually like his dad brought him to the set of Dr. Dre and Tupac's music video shooting right in their
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood, and that was like his first experience and what really inspired him at a really young age. And then sometime after being age 8 and starting to rap, he met, I guess, Top Dog and got into TDE, the record label. And a lot of the features on this record are his friends Schoolboy Q and J Rock. And a lot of those he worked with a lot previously and still does to this day, which is really cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely I'd say aside from Odd Future, which like doesn't really exist anymore. Like the TDE crew are some of the tightest, you know. Schoolboy Q and J Rock and Kendrick always supporting each other, and Absol's on that. I might be wrong if I
Oh,
say
yeah,
that.
Absol too. I forgot.
Yeah,
No, he is, yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah, and
they're very tight with each other. Always pop up on each other's records.
Anthony or Top Dog, I think he was interviewed about this album, and he said basically this album has been in the works since Kendrick like was born, and this album really is the story of his, I mean, really his adolescence, which actually m.A.A.d two A's, which always confused me. It didn't actually always confuse me until I actually like I just kind of got used to seeing it that way.
Yeah,
But one interpretation is my angry adolescence divided,
yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, and then of course the other interpretation. I like the My Angry Adolescence better because I think it more accurately describes the story. But then of course, My Angels on Angel Dust, which is also in some less, I think less so, but in some ways related to the story and talking about his friends and everything that his friends got into growing up. So
Yeah. I like that one better just in terms of like how deep it is, and like I like the album in general because obviously we didn't grow up in a rough neighborhood or in any kind of poverty, but I don't know, there's still parts of it you can definitely learn from, and you really can like this is such a freaking deep and raw and vulnerable album, and he had to like bleep certain parts out because they were like incriminating, and not even just that, but just like his different emotions, so you can kind of take away so much from it for sure.
yeah, yeah. In terms of in terms of crime too, it's also criminally underrated too. And like with how much people talk about it still to this day, it's kind of not, but in terms of how it was recognized at the time, it was definitely not given the accolades it deserves. So the most popular charting song on the album was Mad City, and it only peaked at number 75. And now this was at the time before they were counting streaming, but even still, at the time that it dropped, streaming wasn't even like as much of a juggernaut as it was before. Although that probably would have boosted it massively, but it's still weird that it didn't get higher. And Kendrick has 13 Grammys, but none of them are related to this album at all. No songs, not for the album.
Wow.
Now, they were nominated. He was nominated for that year for Best Rap Album and Album of the Year. Actually, this was in 2014 because of, I think, when this came out in the year. The Grammys are always delayed, kind of like Skrillex got recognized years later.
Yeah.
But so it was nominated for those categories, and of course, famously, Macklemore and Ryan Lewis won the best rap
Oh,
album that
that's
year.
that year?
Yeah.
Oh.
So took it down from that,
That
and
hurts.
then Daft Punk won Album of the Year that year, which like kind of hard to compare the two albums, Random Access Memories to Good Kid, Mad City, but at least he should have won best.
Pharrell is on both.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even make that connection. Pharrell had it. Pharrell was a shoo-in either way. But at least he should have won best rap category that year. Like,
Oh, for sure.
like what was even going on there?
Yeah, and also criminally underrated. I think most people growing up, because this is definitely a youth album. Like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of older people listen to it, but it is definitely more popular with a certain generation. Like, I remember at work, I think somebody like in Slack was talking about like the greatest rapper, and everybody said Tupac, and like I didn't grow up with him or like any of like the '90s kind of people, but Kendrick kind of follows that legacy, and I think Kendrick is kind of the Tupac for like our generation, millennial, Gen Z, whatever you call it. But.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's why on a later album that he would put out, the Tupac allegory is so strong and kind of poetic justice. Him like going to see Tupac. Yeah, a little reference there. Like poetic justice, him seeing Tupac when he was younger, because of that generation, Tupac was the like conscious rapper. So now, moving on, you know, new king had to sit on the throne.
Something that we alluded to earlier with Frank Ocean is like the art and the commercial accessibility of it, and I think this album is a perfect example of that, because there's something so deep and very spiritual, like great storytelling. Like the album itself, I actually just got the vinyl for my birthday a few weeks ago, and it literally, I mean, it says this everywhere, but it's called a short film by Kendrick Lamar. Like the album Good Kid, Mad City, a short film, but it's also just such a huge like commercial. It's like everybody can listen to it. It's like you on at parties, and you know, like Swimming Pools is that kind of party song, even when it wasn't intended to be.
Yeah.
So it's I love that it's like art that can like become pop and also something so deep.
Yeah, it's definitely the most accessible Kendrick album. I think Damn is like a decent like midway accessibility as well. But in term like, you know, like if you throw on These Walls from T-Pab, like it's probably not going to be a turn up at the party.
Although there is a reference to Good Kid, Mad City in that song, which even again it makes it even more complex. You have to like go through all these different hoops to full picture.
Yeah. It's like as a discography, it's all connected.
Yeah, and to be honest, I used to definitely judge Kendrick or just like lump him with all the rest of the rap music, think of it as like party music and kind of, you know, rough and like putting out a bad message. But then actually in my pop music history class in college, my professor did a bonus lecture after we had our finals about T-Pab, and the way he like went through it and showed how crazy deep, like every line had like 4 different references, and you know, just that got me into like listening to albums, listening to it with such a new lens, and that really made me go back and listen to this. So I got into this like way late, but now it's like one of my all-time favorite hip-hop albums for sure.
Yeah. So tell me about it. Tell me about this album.
Oh yeah, so to start off, first song we got Shireen, aka Master Splinter's daughter, which is actually a TMNT reference, which I never really watched that, but definitely funny.
I've never gotten into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so you know, I'm familiar with the main turts, but not I didn't watch it that much, so I'm not sure about that reference, but it's a good intro. Kendrick always has super solid intros. This is no exception.
And this one is super confusing, and I listened to Dissect, which is like my favorite podcast for sure, and they have a season on T-Pab, and then they have a season on Damn, and in both of them they briefly go over this album. So that's where a lot of my knowledge comes from. And I also went on Genius, which is very similar to Dissect, with to get all the different information about every line. But I think the weirdest song is this song, because it's actually like midway through the story. If you notice at the end, like comes to Shireen's house, and there's these like 2 guys with hoodies, and it just stops abruptly, and then it's like that comes up, you know, right after Poetic Justice. So it's kind of, at first I didn't like how he did that, but then I actually love that it's like kind of, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, I just kind of like where it sits actually as an intro.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of like thinking about it like a film, that would be
Mm-hmm.
like they you got to open up somewhere closer to the climax, and then you go back in time.
Yeah.
So
My favorite thing about this song is just the like tone and the moodiness, and I think looking at it like a movie, you can see each song as like a scene, and just like one thing I don't necessarily love, like when I first got into this album, is like how different every song was and like the production and the features and the instruments. But now I actually love it looking at it as a movie and seeing this song as such a somber and like it's so vulnerable. I mean, he's just talking about his lust for his girlfriend and like as he's pretty much like 16, 17, and it's very like relatable and honest, and I love the guitar and the piano and everything about it. Just really, it's just so cool.
yeah, and then it moves on to "Don't Kill My Vibe," which is like for me this is like the start. Not that Shireen's not an amazing opener, but in terms of the narrative, this is like the start.
Yeah. Well, it's actually not. I hate to correct you, but this is actually a song that's like out. It was recorded and like the lyrics are after the whole narrative finishes. So this is kind of like
I did not know that.
yeah. So somebody compared it to like the credit rolls, and it's kind of like a overview of the album and how he's grown as an artist. So this song, if you think about it, it's more talking about his relation to like the music after becoming famous, and saying like he's deep, he's in between this like self improvement, spirituality, being a good force for humanity, and like his like growing up in Compton and like the violence and the lust in his heart, and he's so conflicted that he's just like, don't kill my vibe, like um, I just gotta like relax and like be me. So
Yeah, yeah. I kind of saw it as what's it called? Like if like the main character is doing like a voiceover at some like around the beginning of the film, he's like, "This is how I got like here."
right,
That's how I kind of viewed it. But that also
totally.
makes sense if it was the end of the story as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's also
Yeah.
weird because the end of the album is like the start of the story where he says, I need your van, mom. I'll be back in 15 minutes to go visit Shireen." So
Yeah.
it's like the whole thing is a little confusing, which again, it's so cool that it's open ended. And it's actually cool that it's his mom and dad in these like voicemails too. I love that little tidbit.
Yeah.
And this song
So
too like stands up in so many ways. Like I've DJ'd with this a ton of times, and it just is such a good song. Like you can play it late at night, chilling, or in like a concert, and it's still just like musically, it's so great.
yeah, yeah. It works in a lot of different settings cuz like it doesn't have the energy of a banger, but it goes off like a banger.
Yeah, it's like a great middle ground, and like the orchestra when it comes in, and Anna
Mhm.
Wise is on a lot of these tracks, and I love her voice. I just think it's so beautiful to like, especially when her and Kendrick are going together with the chorus and the hooks.
Mhm.
I love every hook on this album. They're all like perfect. They don't overstay their welcome. They're unique. They're not cheesy. So good.
Yeah, for sure. And then after that we have Backseat Freestyle.
Mm. And yeah, this is definitely the start, I guess, quote unquote, from most people's interpretation of the narrative, where he's with his homies and they're going for their first day in day out in the town, and like peer pressure is the next song, but they're kind of like going in to start their journey, and it's that like old school K dot. And this song always confused me just because of how of a typical hip hop song it is, but
Yeah, in a vacuum, it definitely it's not that deep in a vacuum, although he's absolutely spitting on this like oh my gosh, it's like a volcano erupting. But so very very technical, very talented in that, but in terms of like content in a vacuum, it's not that special, but it makes sense when you consider everything that follows it.
yeah, and the beat is also insane. Like I think that's honestly why in high school and like early college before I knew the deep side, I liked him so much because the beats were like so insane, and like the music, like how much hip hop has such dynamic and interesting music. I guess he has a budget, but still like it's so good.
Then after that, we have one of my favorites, "The Art of Peer
Mm.
Pressure."
Yeah, why is this one? Cuz I love these deep songs, but to me I think Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst is like my preferred of these two longer story songs, but
Yeah. Uh, it's like straight up poetry for me,
mhm.
and I like this one I think so. You're saying "Sing About Me" was your favorite of like those two. I would also consider that one poetry.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I like this one. One in terms of what he's recounting,
Yeah.
and then two that it's a little bit more concise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense.
like, like, "Sing About Me" is like an opera, and this is more like a shorter story.
Mm-hmm.
So I just like its concise nature.
I love again how dynamic like there's a beat switch in this one very early on. It starts a lot more upbeat and then there's that like super somber change early on. And I also love when like the police sirens like it's you really like feel like you're in the car and you're
It
in the
freaks me
house.
out every
Yeah.
time. Yeah. Oh man, it's a good one. And then after that, we've got "Money Trees" with J Rock.
Yeah, this one I also liked for the beat. And I don't know, like this one was actually the hardest one for me to interpret, especially in terms of the overall narrative. But if you look at the lyrics, it actually makes a lot of sense. It like references all of the other three songs that we've heard pretty much. And it's really catchy too. And again, like I love the call and response and like his performance in terms of his vocal delivery, his rapping, his like tone, his like the words he uses, literally everything about it to me, you couldn't show me like a rapper that is more impressive just even on this project. Like we haven't even gotten to some of the better, more emotional tracks, but like well we have, like there's such a range here, but this one especially I really love.
Yeah. Following that is "Poetic Justice," which has one of his biggest features on it.
Mhm.
Although I guess at the time, Drake was not like what he is today, but still a pretty big
Right.
feature considering that this is like Kendrick's commercial debut.
Yeah, and I also like how like I looked up in the lyrics Drake is talking about one of his girlfriends and it's interesting to see Drake at a more innocent phase of his life.
Yes, for sure.
And Kendrick is kind of talking about the same kind of thing, and they're both kind of coming at it from a similar angle. And it's also hilarious because Poetic Justice, it's kind of sad, but like the thing that happens with like he has all this like love for her, and then getting jumped at the end of the song, it's kind of sad, but it's like that ironic twist that every like movies always have those kinds of things in them.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel about this song overall in the grand scheme of this whole album?
Yeah, I really like it in terms of a song. It's really accessible, and in terms of the narrative, it's really important too. Like a lot of it does focus around Shireen, but also just as a song, the lines are all really well written. As a poem would be, they have so many double meanings and like clever wordplay and similes and metaphors and yeah, I really like
Yeah.
this one and the beat and like I love. I think it's Anna Wise. I'm not sure actually, but I love the female vocal that's like always in the background. It's almost used as an instrument, and it's just beautiful. I think how it layers on top of Drake and Kendrick.
Yeah. None of those ever got through to me because this is actually my least favorite song on the whole project.
Oh wow,
I don't think it's a bad song by any means. It's just like the most forgettable to me.
interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
to me I really like it, and it's like this one and Money Trees are both really catchy, and like I think this album was easy for me to get into because like there were a few songs that I didn't already know. Like there's so many just great songs that you can like take out of the album and they're still good, but if you put them in a story, it like doubles how good they are.
Oh yeah, for sure. After that is "Good Kid," the first half of the title.
Yeah, like this is one I definitely didn't know a whole lot of before. And this one, I don't know if I like it more than Art of Peer Pressure, but I definitely love the storytelling in it. I mean, it's really fast and frantic and like, and also just super sad. And it's actually Pharrell doing the hook, which I had no idea. You wouldn't really, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little stuck in there. Pharrell is also something I learned is also like a producer of the album. Like he gave creative direction for it.
Nice.
Yeah. After "Good Kid" is "Mad City," the more well known of the title.
Mm.
Yeah. This is probably "Swimming Pools" might be a little bit more well known, but this is probably the most well known on the album.
Yeah. This one is probably the hardest hip hop song like out there. Like I've loved when this one's played live, but it's so funny to like actually look into the lyrics and see just how like frantic and sad and his performance is absolutely this is probably his best performance for sure on the whole thing.
Yeah. And it's like a painful song.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like always consider that because he's just going so quickly on it, but
Yeah.
but it really is. And then of course there's the beat switch, which a lot of people stop listening before
Yeah,
that point, which makes me sad.
yeah. I love the beat switch actually. Like,
Yeah, me
I
too.
was trying to think about a few musical elements that don't hold up because it is like a very contemporary like 2012 album, but I still think like a lot of these, production and like external to the message really still hold up well, including this part of the song.
Mm-hmm.
And this part's even sadder, honestly. And like this is where
Yeah.
they reveal the, um, like basically Compton made me an angel on angel dust, which is just so poetic and depressing. Especially like earlier in the song, he mentioned seeing his first like I don't know if it was his uncle die at age 9.
Mm-hmm.
That's just crazy. And then I love the part at the end. This was an interesting theory that like he says Compton, USA, which is like you could interpret it as saying it's a message to all of the like poor and like impoverished areas of America, and it's not just Compton, California, but it's like a broader message. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then after that is everyone's favorite party anthem that's not about party is swimming pools.
yeah, this one's great, and it was probably the first one I heard, and like again, it's like when you remove the context, it is like such a great song. Um, I especially love like the bridge and the extended version that most people don't know, but on the album it's like they have a longer version that adds to the narrative a lot, and I think that
Oh
part
yeah.
is so great.
Yeah, I think that part can't be ignored. I mean, like if you're just if you're just like hanging out at a college party or something, of course you can. But I feel like in terms of the narrative, you like can't ignore that part.
Yeah, and I love like the dream state that like goes into it and warps into the last part of it, dreaming about Shireen, and then, I love especially the like half beat on it, like the more acoustic drums. I just
Mm-hmm.
love that part.
I also love how the timbre of his voice changes when I don't know if that was done like in post, like after recorded, or if he's actually just dropping his voice like that. But I love how the timbre of his voice changes when it's his conscience talking to him.
Yeah, same thing in Mad City at the end. It like goes
Mm-hmm.
super super low and super high, and I think it was like something about him looking at things as a kid, like from a really, like he has a lot of Matrix references in this album in terms of like the red pill and like seeing the world for how it is, and realizing that was trauma, and then like seeing it from a more perverted, like corrupt state. So that's really interesting too, how he uses his voice in so many ways.
Yeah, and then after that is a 12-minute monstrosity.
Mm.
Sing of me, I'm dying. Sing about me, I'm dying of thirst.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite deep song on this album. I love the musical aspects of it. It honestly reminds me of maybe a song off Damn or his Untitled Remastered. I don't know if that gives. It just sounds nostalgic to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this could honestly be a whole. This one song could be like a whole album itself.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like, so in the story, they had just, I guess, like, so Kendrick got jumped, and then basically they're coming for him. I guess the rival gang because they're outside of Compton. And then
Mm-hmm.
Kendrick's friend's brother dies in a shootout, and Kendrick and his friends kind of want to retaliate. And it's so crazy because the first verse is actually from his friend's brother that died. It's him singing to Kendrick, and then before the chorus hits, which the chorus is so beautiful, but he literally like, and if I die before your album drops, and then you hear gunshots, and then Kendrick starts the chorus of like, promise that you will sing about me,
Yeah,
and it's
it's
just,
very heavy.
it's such a like sobering and like real song.
Yeah, it's a lot to. I imagine that this is probably like the most underplayed song too, just because of how long it is.
Yeah, and then the second half is even more brutal and sad. And this is, I think, this is why I like the song so much because the second half to me is so good. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it really is poetry. But the dying of thirst part, it's almost like a constant bar. Like there is a hook, but it's just like this constant dying of thirst, and there's this like
Mm-hmm.
constant yeah, and like it just keeps going and going and going. And the most like powerful part at the end is when they just in the skit they find this old lady who introduces them to Jesus and tells them about her real life, and they do the sinner's prayer, which actually is also hinted at in the start of the album, which I love because the Shireen music
Mm-hmm.
comes in again at this part, and it like it all just kind of is this
Mm-hmm.
amazing full story.
And then following this one is real.
And yeah, this one, it's so funny. Like, coming back to it, the first thing I thought of was that it reminded me of Pray for Me with The Weeknd off Black Panther.
Yeah, there are some similarities there. Yeah.
And this one is really long too, but I really love this. Is like such a catchy song, and again with Anna Wise on it, especially that hook really like got stuck in my head for a while listening to this.
Yeah, this one's seated nicely in there towards the end.
Yeah, and I love like hearing the like kind of the finishing touches of his parents on the voicemail with like his dad saying, you know, like I'm sorry for what happened to you. I don't want you to grow up like me, but like being real isn't, you know, all those things like having power and people and getting money and girls. Being real is respect and family and God. And then his mom saying like, please like give back to your community, sing words of encouragement, and that's like both of those things are literally what he's done post this story and his growing up and you know as a teenager. So I love how all this plays out.
Yeah. And then we have the formal finale of the album, which is Compton, featuring Dr. Dre, also from Compton.
And just Blaze producing this song,
Ah, yes.
which is apparent by the end of it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, listen.
Yeah, this is another one of my favorites from the album, in that it's like he's signing it to who he wrote it for.
And it shows the message is really to like uplift Compton and like show it in a new light, and to like good Kid, Mad City. Like the reason I guess relate to it, because I didn't come from a place like this, of course, but like, you know, thinking about it as like you have a really pure heart, you're an angel, but then your environment can like cause all this like turmoil, whether it's physical or mental, and then especially with like angel dust, that like comparison and trauma, and you know your environment can really trap you. But then the message is ultimately like, you know, through faith and through loving yourself with real, just to like break free from that and like be a positive light for people around you.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the lyrical content of this one. I think it's cool bringing in, you know, he can't bring in Tupac, although on a later project he found a way to. But this was like the next best thing, and having that feature on it. So
Yeah, one thing between MC8 on I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, on Mad City, and Dr. Dre on this one, and not Drake, but I'm not a huge fan of like the gangster rap sound of like how aggressive and like in your face it is. But obviously like I can see what he's going for in this album. So that's one thing I personally don't care for, but like I think this is probably the best gangster rap album, that being said. Not that it's just gangster rap, but
yeah, it can definitely be fit into that category, and you know, I do think it competes with some other ones like Enter the Wu-Tang that are of that caliber, you know. So that takes the end. There's also a deluxe version that has some other songs, like The Recipe, which actually I think The Recipe came out before that this album came out at all, but then wasn't on the final official cut. But how would you surmise everything here?
Well, one thing I definitely wanted to mention is we filmed this in 2020. There's a ton of protests, a lot of civil rights stuff going on, a lot of the police brutality murders, and you know African American history and all that has been at the forefront a lot of this summer. And I think this is kind of what made me dive back into Kendrick. And like I had Damn on vinyl a while ago and like saw him on tour and stuff and was into him, but I really like finally understood T-Pap through listening to Dissect and went back to this album a lot. And I think it's honestly, I couldn't recommend that podcast enough, and just listening to his music, because to me it's been like one of the best creations for me, even though I don't know what it's like, but I can like get a little glimpse, and it's so real and so vulnerable that it's like I think it's a great tool for anybody to learn.
Yeah. So do you think it holds up? I think you kind of just answered that, but
Yeah, I mean, I got into it in college, and I think it's better than a lot of his contemporaries nowadays. Like, there's few rappers that I truly can like really listen to in a real way, and not like I always like real has like stuck with me through like listening to this summer. Like just the word real has like re-entered my vocabulary, and I just think it's more profound than we usually use it. But I love it.
yeah, I think it holds up in that it's not only sonically, it's sonically appealing, it's conceptually appealing, and it's lyrically deep all at once. So I think it's incredibly well done for that. It's this is gonna be controversial, but I would put Damn and T-Pab above this one, but I still think it very much holds up, and I'm not sure where you'd rank it amongst the rest of his discography, but
Yeah, I prefer Damn because I relate to it the most, and it's helped me both with like faith and just humanity. It touches on so many like raw human emotions.
mm-hmm.
I think I like this better than TPAB just because it's easier to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think TPAB has like grown me a lot more and like opened me up to a lot more ideas.
Yeah.
But like most people wouldn't be able to get that just from listening to it. Whereas this, I think you can just listen to it and get the story pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. What are some of your favorite songs off the whole thing?
I think my favorite is probably Mad City, and I like it even more knowing that there's a second half since listening to it fully. Also, I think Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe is probably, actually, that's probably my favorite just because it's like you can literally play it almost every day of the year and it wouldn't get old to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really like Sing About Me, I'm Dying with Real, and Money Trees. Those are like my top four, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Five, I guess that's five.
Yeah,
What about you?
definitely. My favorites are definitely Swimming Pools, Mad City, Compton, and The Art of Peer Pressure. Although,
Interesting.
although I wouldn't say that I don't like any of them on the album. Like when I think about those four, which are definitely my favorite, but I start to follow, it's like, oh, but I also like Money Trees, and I also like Don't Kill My Vibe.
Yeah.
Like it just like keeps going. Yeah, but yeah, this was a really fun one to talk about, and I feel like it's been talked about so much. I feel like I can't really add anything to it, but that's like my experience with it and how it relates to me. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think my only slight critique is I don't love all of the crazy varied production and ideas. Like most of it works really well, but I think he's done it better since then with his next two albums in terms of it being a little more connected and concise.
Yes,
Musically.
I think sonically it's his most disconnected, other than Section 80. I think sonically it's less. He really mastered the production direction on T-Pab and Damn. Like those are more cohesive in terms of the instrumentals, but you know, I still think like Beats production on this still great. It's just less tied together.
Also, just the features. I love a lot of them on this project, but I just think he does a little better with features on the next albums as well.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, he was so young and he blew up from this album, and there was a lot more pressure on his work, which I think is like good and bad that he's like this prophet and this like he's on such a pedestal. But
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot recently about like idolizing people and putting people on a pedestal. But the thing is, for Kendrick, I think he has enough humility to handle it. You know,
yeah,
I could go deeper and talk about like certain interviews he's done and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
I'll reel it back for now, maybe at a later date. But
that just feels so good to talk about because like I've had these thoughts, you know, like jumbling around so much, and like I love this thing so much.
yeah, but before we wrap it up, do you have any questions from listeners?
Yeah, I got one from my sister, and she's been listening, and that's been super cool. She asked, "What are our three most influential artists we've listened to?" And I think what she means is like, just to clarify, like artists that have kind of influenced your life and your tastes, and you know that the most.
Okay, influential, but not. I guess I'm going with what's changed me the most, and not necessarily what I'd put at the best. Well, what is it for you?
I think Felix is definitely, I don't know my first, but he's led me into so many other artists that even like artists that aren't necessarily electronic, like he's even led me into hip hop, partly. So I think that's definitely one. And then I would say like Eden in terms of lyrics and just how deep and like he was like one of the first artists that I really listened and like got into like the lyrics. And then probably like Porter, weirdly enough, just because he kind of give it almost in a third party of like he influences m.A.A.d and he influences all these other artists, but he kind of started this like era trend of like making an album be like a era and like a certain sound and like all the art attached to it, and also he was one of the first like EDM DJs to start doing live concerts and a huge influence on the scene too.
For me, I would say it's probably gosh, it's probably Muse in terms of how they like sucked me into modern music and how they sucked me into albums, because a lot of the times before I was just listening to singles, and how I got into Muse was their big songs from like you sharing them and stuff, but they really got me to like listen to whole album experiences. Next would be Dead Mouse, because Dead Mouse was who got me into electronic music and opened up that entire world to me.
Yeah.
Like, it literally just all started with Ghosts and stuff, man. I heard that, and I heard that because I was listening to pop music that had like electronic flavors to it. And I was making, like, I was burning a CD of stuff like that, and I was like, I need one more song. And I was like, I've heard this Dead Mouse guy. And that's where it all started. And gosh, who would be a third? Oh man, there's so many that I could like slot into that category. But I'm gonna throw, this is a bit of a weird one. It's gonna date me a bit, but I would throw Never Shout Never into that category. And for context for behind that one is that I was into a lot of emo music around like early high school, and like in terms of like the stories that it's gonna seem so cheesy, but in terms of the stories that he was writing a lot in terms of like love and family and the feelings that you're going through at that time, like that's what I was relating to a lot, and that definitely pulled me through a lot of dark times. That guy's childhood was probably a little bit closer to my childhood than like Kendrick's childhood was, even though I would qualify Kendrick as the better artist.
Yeah, I'm actually going to switch Eden with Kendrick because I realized how much more Kendrick has like shaped me as a person and my brain and heart. Like, he's grown so much compassion for me. And like I said, Damn, especially with like the faith aspect, the human aspect, and like the history of and everything. So
yeah,
I'll switch that around.
Yeah. I've got a question. Let me see
Is it spicier than last week or less spicy?
It's a good one. It's an interesting one. So, I just found it. All right. This is from my friend Will, and he says, "What piece of media, book, TV show, video game, art, whatever, has done the most to promote or encourage simp culture, and vice versa, what piece of media has done the most to try and eliminate it?"
I'm honestly not educated on. I barely know what that means, but
so that's a term that's been around for a long time, but gaining more popularity lately. But it's basically like a guy who is pining for a girl a lot and doing a lot of things for a girl, but she's unreciprocating that love and attention. You know, this is I have to think about this a lot. I almost should have like done like some research on this before. I guess this is probably controversial take, but I guess you could say in a certain sense, The Office, because Jim was kind of simping for Pam for a while there, you know?
I mean, I was thinking about that with like Community, for instance. I just think a lot of those shows would definitely not happen in modern day. But
yeah, Community's gonna get shaken up for you if that's at the point where you feel like it's the case for that.
I'm waiting.
Yeah, I guess controversial take, The Office. Yeah. For most to promote that, mostly because of its mass popularity. I'm sure there's a bunch of anime that probably better fit that category.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, this is kind of like reverse gender, but shoot, what the frick is it called?
Like Twilight or something?
No, but they're Twilight. If you want Twilight to be your answer, that's a good answer as a reverse gender category for that.
Yeah, because like 50 Shades is like the darkest version of that, where it's like you should not be pining for that at all.
Yeah. Shoot, gosh, what the frick is that book called? Oh my gosh. It's written by Jane Austen. Pride and Prejudice. There we go. Pride and Prejudice. Let's say the OG example of that.
There you go. That's a great answer. I'm sure there was a piece of like
Yeah.
a literal art that actually inspired that. So that's my answer.
Yo, I bet we could. We'll have to dig that up. Do you think there's one that's like the anti of that? Do you think there's one that encourages the opposite of that, like healthy relationships?
I think most media shows more healthier relationships. I would just for something that popped out for Epstein documentary, and that makes me like anti anything that's like inappropriate relationship wise. Like there's all these red flags that I'm seeing that is true, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I would actually say I would actually throw Steven Universe into that category. I'm not sure if you've gotten much further with that, but between like Steven and his friend, that's kind of like as the show progresses, it's kind of like the purest relationship, and there winds up becoming some complications with that later on down the line. But it's just like a lot of innocence and a lot of reciprocation, and sometimes lack of that, but then working out your problems and like. Yeah, I think that's a good example of it, actually.
I actually love how Adventure Time deals with relationships, especially like later on.
Yeah.
Mainly with Finn. I just think seeing his growth as he literally grows up every year from like 12 to 18 and like being able to relate so much to that growing up and literally seeing that growing up with him. So I would put him in there. Ash Ketchum, he literally never gets the girl after 20 years. That's a perfect demotivator.
That's a perfect example. Oh my gosh. That is a good example.
But that makes it worse because then the fans that are like more extreme are even crazier.
That's also a good point. Oh man, I wonder how many lives Ash's love life has destroyed.
I literally thought I'd have to not answer, but now I'm getting so passionate.
Oh man. Well, good answers all around for that one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking about this. You know, this was only about an hour, but honestly, we probably could have talked about it for longer because there's just so much content in this album.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out, Drew.
Yeah, and remember to check us out. We're on every podcast streaming platform, also YouTube, and there's a playlist linked in the description for music we talk about, our favorite ones we talk about as well. And let a friend know if you like the podcast, and ask us any questions on our social medias, which are down below too. Yeah.
Yeah, share it around. We actually have a listener in Ireland right now, so shout out if you're the Irish listener.